our honorable resource person, Professor Dr. Mohit ul Alam sir, to enlighten us with his speech.
Sir. Yes.
Thank you, Jerin, for inviting me, and thank you, the Department of English Language and Literature of Leading University, for providing this forum in which I can share my uh, love for Shakespeare with a group of avid listeners who I believe are all budding scholars. I mean the students and also the young faculty who will one day probably emerge as also renowned scholars of the country. But on top of it, I would like to pay my homage and respect to uh, Danobir Ragib Ali Khan.
Ragib Ali, Syed Ragib Ali, Danobir, Dr. Syed Ragib Ali, sir.
Danobir Dr. Syed Ragib Ali, about whom I heard so much in my every visit to Sylhet, but I had never had the opportunity to see him actually, and this is therefore a very august evening for me to have the opportunity to have a sight of him. And I would also like to thank the speakers who have already in so many ways, and probably there are some issues which will also be covered in my, and as you know, I have selected usurpation. Then later on, I thought better and I changed the next word, approve with condone, because condemn and condone go together rather well. So you should take it as, does Shakespeare condemn or condone usurpation? Now, as you see, the topic itself is not a very pleasant one because it is about killing, and not only killing a king, which is really a grave matter. That's why I would like you to have a very positive attitude in whatever things I will deliberate here today, because I will try to desensitize the issue so that the killing of a king will appear to be a regular practice which was followed in the medieval Europe as well as in Renaissance time, and especially when Shakespeare was actually living in the late 16th centuries. At that time, it became a very national concern for the country in which he was a citizen of, because England was at that time, in Shakespeare's early part of Shakespeare's time, England was ruled by Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth, because of the historical reasons now, since this present Queen of England is also an Elizabeth, so therefore she is happily, adjectivized as Elizabeth the First. Now this Queen Elizabeth, she came to power in 1558, and by that time, she was aging. At that time, you see the aging limit was either 55 or 60. Today it is more than 80. And in Elizabeth's time, when she was becoming an old woman, reaching her 65th year, the whole nation became very concerned about who the next monarch of England would be, because Elizabeth was never married. And since she was never married, she could not have any children. By today's standard, it is not a problem to have children without marriage. But in Elizabeth's time, since she was the queen herself, she very decidedly went against marriage because her few romantic affairs in the early period of her life uh, failed. So therefore, then she told her chief advisor, whose name was Walsingham, one day after a session of the council was over, she tapped Walsingham on the back, saying that, Mr. Walsingham, I am married to England. So that is why she is called a virgin queen. But it's fine. That is fine for so far as herself is concerned. But that was not fine for a country which was going through this restless period. Who is going to be the next king? Because at that time, you see, conspiracies were a rife kind of practice. The monarchs, they were always very cautious about the uh, fact that conspiracy might be hatched and their life would be jeopardized. So one of her very favorite courtiers was Earl of Essex, and Earl of Essex was it was thought that Earl of Essex would become the husband of Elizabeth, and Elizabeth probably had also entertained a certain romantic fascination for this Earl of Essex. But this Earl of Essex temperamentally belonged to the medieval heroic age, to the medieval chivalrous age, which believed in action. And he was so much ambitious and daring that once Elizabeth sent him to Ireland to manage a rebellion there. But he failed to contain that rebellion and came back to London, which dissatisfied Elizabeth very much. You must remember that Elizabeth, though she is a Renaissance monarch, but at the same time she was a medieval queen too. So for a medieval king or queen, everything was always an absolute kind of action. So Elizabeth therefore did not tolerate this failure on the part of Earl of Essex, and Earl of Essex also rebelled against her. Then he was executed. This very execution that took place in 1601, the year when Shakespeare would have completed Hamlet, this very execution of Earl of Essex is a symbolic kind of event because it shows that the medieval chivalrous age has faded, has gone out of order, and a new power was emerging. And this new power can be defined as civil bureaucracy. It is found that when Elizabeth spent her days with the medieval knights like Earl of Essex and all the dukes and lords like that, but at the end of the day, she had a secret council in which she called up her civil secretaries like William Cecil and David Cecil. So it has been seen by historians that every time there was a critical issue, Elizabeth at the daytime sided with the knights, the ambitious knights, the knights who were warmongers. But when the daylight receded, evening descended, she actually paid her hearing to the civil bureaucrats. So therefore, Elizabeth could maintain her rule in England not because she was prompted by the medieval chivalry, but because she was listening to the more reasonable and qualified opinions and advices forwarded by the Cecils and Walsingham. So this is what we have to bear in mind when we are speaking about this usurpation. Usurpation actually means two things. Either a legal king is removed or a legal king is murdered. When the legal king is murdered, it is called regicide. And the plays that we will be dealing with today, Richard II, for example, and Hamlet, followed by Macbeth. And these three tragedies actually show regicide in this form or that form. And the other tragedy which I will also touch upon is King Lear. King Lear is not about regicide, but it is very much about usurpation because King Lear himself usurps willingly himself. So that is how usurpation takes the form of regicide in Shakespeare's serious tragedies. But as against this, in the comedies, there is also the uh, fact of usurpation coming. Say in As You Like It, uh, there is usurpation. Duke Senior is usurped by his brother Frederick. And also in the last play, Shakespeare's last play, The Tempest, you see Prospero is usurped by his brother uh, Alonso. Okay, so here usurpation has happened in all these plays uh, through a rivalry between brothers, which in literary language is called sibling rivalry. For example, in Richard II, which was written in 1595, Richard II was usurped. This is coming from actual history of England. Richard II was usurped by his cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, who became Henry IV as the English king. So you see, a brother is removing another brother from the throne. So in this way, in Shakespeare's treatment of the theme of usurpation is always centering around this dynastic conflict or internecine struggle within the family. One brother removing another brother from the throne. This is called sibling rivalry. In Hamlet, it is very much evident because Claudius, the younger brother, kills his older brother, King Hamlet, in order to get the throne. And in again Macbeth, which was written in 1606, Hamlet was written in 1600 and 1601. Even in 1606, Macbeth killed Duncan, and Macbeth and Duncan were actually first cousins. Macbeth's grandfather and Duncan's grandfather was the same king, Malcolm II. So that is how you see in every case, it is a brother removing another brother, not an outsider. In As You Like It, for example, Duke Frederick Senior is pushed out of the throne by Duke Frederick, another brother. In The Tempest, Prospero is removed by Alfonso. So this is how we have to understand that the case of usurpation in Shakespeare's case, though it is a social affair, it is a political affair, or it is a matter of the state, but it actually grew out of the family rivalry. So now the question that Shakespeare poses in all these plays, what actually is the basis for a king to think that he is the king and he is inviolable, he is untouchable, nothing can, no kind of rebellion can take place against him. This comes from also from a Renaissance concept, which thought that the intellectual milieu of the time conceived of this idea that there is a correspondence between three planes of existence. Three planes of existence means the cosmic existence. Cosmic existence means the universe where God, angels, they exist. Then there is the political existence, which they call body politic. So body politic is the concept which is concerned with a king administering his country. Then the third correspondence comes three correspondences. The macrocosm, which is the universe in which God, angels, stars, planets, that is the universe exists. That level, it is called body politic. Body politic is dominated by the king. And when it comes to the individual level, it is called microcosm. So because of this connection, correspondences between these three types of existence, the European monarchs, not only in England, also in France and Spain and in other countries, which were monarchical countries in the medieval time, they all conceived of an idea that the king actually is a divine king. The king is not only a mortal monarch. The king assumes the power of the divine energy of God. So therefore, the king is only half.
Sir, sir, for sir, could you please repeat again? For network issue, we miss your cosmic aspect and then body politics, and the rest we missed.
Okay. Now,
Veronica, you will have time to make questions, okay, at the end of the lecture, okay? So let's continue, right? Okay. So, would you please continue?
But where is my connection gone?
We can hear you, sir.
Sir, you were talking about the cosmic aspect, body
Okay.
politics.
That's okay. But now I have lost connection with you. I don't see your faces. Let me see what is happening.
Veronica, you will make questions later, right? And these questions you note it down. You note it down, and at the end of the lecture, you will make it. Sure. Okay. You'll get the.
Okay. Thank you, student. But you see, if you want me to repeat, then I can repeat it. But that will be rather unwise because my flow of thought is in a continuous mode now. So that will be rather interrupting my flow of thoughts.
Sir, would you please continue? Continue, sir, please.
So you see, so because of this correspondences between the universal existence, that is macrocosm. Macrocosm means the bigger picture. Then body politic means the state condition. And macrocosm means the smaller existence, individual. Because of these correspondences, the kings, the monarchs, the monarchical houses of Europe, they thought that the king is not merely a mortal human being like the subjects of the country. They have got certain special divine powers because they are half mortal, half God. Okay, this concept is called demigod authority. So therefore, a Renaissance monarch or a middle-aged monarch was not only a mortal monarch like our kings today. They were mortal monarch, but at the same time, they were angelic because God has partaken of them. Why did they create this concept? In order to conveniently extend their rule over the nation. Because if the king is not merely a mortal being, but he also assumes the virtues of God, it means he cannot be touched. Because if a rebellion is taken against him, it does not go against him, it also goes against God itself. So therefore it was a blasphemy. It was a sin committed. And it was so strongly propagated and made public by the monarchs of Europe that Elizabeth herself had sermons are like preachings done to the congregations on the Sunday church meetings. And one of the sermons that was compulsorily read by all the fathers in England was entitled like this: An exhortation concerning good order and obedience to rulers and magistrates. That is, Elizabeth made it sure that in every church, on every Sunday congregation, the priest would have to read out the sermon, which preaches that no rebellion against king can be taken. Because if it is taken, it will be considered as a sin against God. But politically speaking, you see, by taking recourse to this religious dimension, they were actually making their political security confirmed. Do you get this point here? That is, the religious excuse was merely used in order to continue their secular rule in the world. But this was propagated by very significant philosophers like Hooker, like Eliot.
Sir,
Eliot was.
Sir, may I
Yes.
interrupt 1 minute? 1 minute, sir. You will start from the point. May I now humbly invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, because he has already joined our webinar. Sir, welcome, sir, to our webinar organized by the Department of English. Although our sir has already started, but sir was busy. Our Vice Chancellor, sir, was busy. Would you please say hello, sir?
Hello. Yes, I'm not busy. Yeah, it is the day of fasting. Please go ahead.
Sir,
Don't
thank you, sir.
Our honorable speakers.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
Now, can you hear me well? I mean, can I be heard?
Yes.
Good, very good.
So as I was explaining, you see, Elizabeth has made it compulsory that in every church on Sunday, this sermon should be read out, in which it is said, stipulated that no rebellion against the king would be tolerated. So this advantage was actually endorsed intellectually by formidable humanists of the time, George Eliot, who wrote a very famous book called The Governor, and then Hooker, and then other humanists also. But one philosopher stands out for his different view on this, and you can imagine who he is, Niccolo Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli wrote a book, a very small book. In Latin, it is called Il Principe, but in English, it is translated as The Prince. Now, The Prince is like a dynamite. It is a small book, but it is like a hydrogen bomb. It contains all the ideas that shattered this idea of divine monarchy. And Machiavelli very, let us say truly, actually, in my opinion, very truly said that all this divine monarchy concept is just repugnant. Repugnant means unacceptable. And he said it is all concoction, manufactured, fabricated, because the royal houses of Europe thought that this kind of preaching would ensure their rule in the kingdoms. So Machiavelli then therefore redefined the motivation of human nature. Machiavelli said that human nature is basically motivated by greed, by a sense of possession, by self-aggrandizement, and by self-gratification. So therefore he said, why does a king want to hold on to a throne? Because the throne is not only a chair, the throne is a symbol only. But through this object, he actually gains access to all kinds of revenues that the state earns. The point is very clear that the throne or the crown or the scepter, these three objects are merely royal objects in order to give credential to a king. But Machiavelli said that actually these are the symbols of a great gratification of the material possessions. So therefore the throne is letting the king to get access to all these revenues. In that time, the real estate revenues, the shipbuilding revenues, all these they could get access to. And because of this, Machiavelli said that the kings were as much political as any normal ambitious citizen is. There is no difference between how a king manipulates his way to his throne, or how a king administers his kingdom, and how a normal man tries to establish a business in the street. There is no difference so far as the motivation of self-aggrandizement is concerned. So therefore, we can see that Machiavelli's ideas were a very solid challenges to the traditional ideas, and that the king is a respectable being, that the king cannot be questioned. Elizabeth said once that you must not must to me. That is, must is a modal verb. And Elizabeth said in one of her, this council sessions, she said, somebody probably told her something like this, royal queen, your majesty, you must marry in order to have children so that the country will get a successor after you die. And Elizabeth said, I must not be mastered. You see, beautiful English. I must not be mastered. So it means what? That the king cannot be asked to do anything. It is the king's privilege which cannot be questioned. Now, Shakespeare, another dimension with this is the rule of primogeniture. Along with the divine monarchy, another concept that was very active is the rule of primogeniture, by which England is still ruled. The rule of primogeniture is an order by which the throne of the king goes down to the eldest child. It does not go sideways to the uncles. From the father, it goes to the son. From the son, it goes to the grandson. Okay, that is called the rule of primogeniture. So this divine monarchy and the rule of primogeniture, when these two are connected together, then the question comes, what happens if the king is not efficient or able to administer the country? Then what would happen to the state? This is a big question. And Machiavelli said that a good but inefficient, let me reverse it. Machiavelli said, a bad but efficient king, I'm repeating, a bad but efficient king is better for the kingdom than a good but inefficient king. This is what Machiavelli said. A bad but efficient king is more suitable to rule a country than a good but inefficient king. Now, when such is the idea prevalent in the Elizabethan age, Shakespeare came to the theatre. He arrived on the theatrical scene in London. And he started writing about English history plays. And the play that is relevant for our discussion is King Richard II. In history, actually, in actual history, King Richard II was deposed by his own cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, in 1399. King Richard II, you see, when he became the king, he was only 9 years old. His grandfather was Edward III, but Edward III's first son was Richard I, Coeur the Lion. But he lost his life in the crusade against the Muslims. So because of that, the grandfather still was alive when he died. And when he died, the grandfather died, the throne went to Richard II. But he was only 9 years old. And can a 9-year-old boy rule a country? No. So what was the system? That he would be assisted by his uncles, which is called a regency. So this regency constituted all the uncles that Richard II had. One of the uncles was very strong. His name was John of Gaunt, and John of Gaunt was the father of Henry Bolingbroke. Anyway, so Richard II, the dispute arose between Richard II and the John of Gaunt family because Richard II was temperamental, moody, and not at all reasonable. And when he grew into age, he assumed power, and by doing that, he confiscated his uncle's property, and he banished Henry Bolingbroke from England for 6 years. But Henry Bolingbroke was a Machiavellian hero. Herein what I am trying to show you that Richard II is modeled in the style of Hooker, Eliot, that is, who believes in the divine monarchy concept, and Henry Bolingbroke, his cousin, is opposite to him, who believes in personal, self-interest, in self-aggrandizement, in political maneuvering, everything. So because of this, Henry Bolingbroke could come up to a level where he could challenge Richard II. In Richard II, in this play, there is a famous scene called the deposition scene. Deposition means where Richard II, the legal king, will be usurped by Henry Bolingbroke. And Henry Bolingbroke will become King Henry IV with the title. And there, in that scene, this is a very tragic scene. Richard II says, "You are asking me to submit to this emerging king, but I have never learned how to genuflex, how to bend my knees, because I have always been a king. Please teach me how to show submission." And in this way, then Richard II says, "I must nothing be." So here, therefore, Shakespeare is putting to test this idea of divine monarchy. And Richard II was so strongly a believer in this idea of divine monarchy. He said, I'm not quoting all the lines because then it will take a lot of time. But those lines are beautiful lines. Whatever paraphrasing I am doing here is like a sword to Shakespeare's gold. Okay? Shakespeare shonner kache amar ei onubad gulo hobe tamar moto. So he said, Richard II said that, okay, I am giving away my crown to you. I must nothing be, he says. Richard II says. So here Shakespeare has put to the test that the concept of divine monarchy actually cannot thrive if it is not supported by material power, like military force, this and that. And Richard II says, you cannot hurt me because God is going to protect me. Does God ever protect anybody if he cannot protect himself? So here Shakespeare has put to the proof that this concept of divine monarchy actually is not tenable. But that is not the end of the conclusion here. At the same time, what Shakespeare does here is that he makes Richard II the hero of the play, not Henry Bolingbroke. Though Henry Bolingbroke is the win, but that is only an external victory, a victory of a kingdom, the possession of a throne, the grabbing of a crown, or the holding of a scepter. But the inner man is now given a lot of a space by Shakespeare. And you see that in Richard II, why the title of the play is Richard II? Because it is his profound feelings, his sense of loss of the crown that has created a kind of agony and pain in him that becomes dramatized in sublime poetry by Shakespeare. So that is why you see Shakespeare may have agreed to the concept that divine monarchy is an untenable concept. But at the same time, he also tries to show that the king may have lost his crown, but the inner human being inside the king has emerged. The same thing that he will be experimented with in King Lear. In King Lear, willfully gives away his crown to his daughters with the dream that he will live happily ever after in the custody of his daughters. But he becomes disillusioned because his daughters then find him a problem, because though he does not remain the king, but still his very bodily existence is posing problem to them. So therefore King Lear then realizes that this kingly position, this crown, also is an institution that one needs to hold on to in order to keep his entity secured. So King Lear then says, I never realized the importance of the crown when I was the king. And then another thing here is that King Lear also realizes the base sting of humanity. After he lost the crown, he becomes aware about the common sufferings people are subjected to. So all these are, Shakespeare's experiments to show that whether a concept which is not qualified by necessary societal and political backup, that concept might fall flat on the ground. Then let us come to Hamlet. Am I boring you? Am I annoying you?
No, no, sir. No, sir. We are enjoying, sir.
Okay. I know that it might be a little out of the way for many of you, but it is the topic that I want to discuss today. I will be very brief. In Hamlet, for example, Hamlet of killing the king had already taken place out of the play. Before the play started, it had taken place. Okay. Now, how would Hamlet know that his father was actually murdered? Then the ghost of Hamlet's father comes from purgatory. Here is also a conflicting point here. In Shakespeare's time, England turned into a Protestant country. But 5 years, before Elizabeth, when her sister was the monarch, Queen Mary was the monarch, then England was a Catholic country. Now, there is a solid difference between Catholicism and Protestantism in respect of one aspect, which is known as purgatory. Purgatory means the place or the interim period after the death of somebody. His soul will reside in purgatory and go through the torture and punishment and many kinds of punishment before God decides whether this soul will travel to heaven or hell. This waiting time is called purgatory. But this purgatory in the Catholic tradition became a source of corruption for the priests. Because you see, when somebody died, brief here, but it's a long chapter. Purgatory is a long chapter in English history or in English theological history. Here, purgatory became a source of corruption for the priests of the Catholic churches because the relatives of the dead man would go to them, paying the money so that the purgatorial period is shortened. They thought that if they give money to the priest and he prays to God, then the purgatorial time or torture or, this punishment will be reduced or shortened. So in this way, they would grab money like this. And when Martin Luther, the Protestant, beginner, the pioneer of Protestant religion, when Martin Luther came into the scene and when he started the Protestant religion, he did away with purgatory because purgatory was the most corrupted means for the religion to be destroyed. Okay. But here in Shakespeare's time, you see what is happening here. It was a Protestant country, so there was no belief in purgatory. But this ghost of Hamlet's father comes from purgatory. Do you see this contradiction here? It means Shakespeare, through his dramatic work, is giving accommodation to a Catholic belief by which the ghost is coming from purgatory, which officially he cannot come because it is a Protestant country now. And why Shakespeare does it? Because there is a personal connection. Shakespeare's father, John Shakespeare, had secretly entertained sympathies for Catholicism. He believed in purgatory. Anyway, the ghost comes from the purgatory, okay? He is a supernatural being. And the ghost tells Hamlet that you must take revenge because this man who is sitting in the throne is not only the king, he has killed me, and not only that, he has also married your mother, my wife. So Claudius is a criminal on double causes. He is a murderer, and at the same time, he has married his bhabi, let us say, okay, sister-in-law. So therefore, Hamlet is now asked to take revenge. Now, what is the problem here? Now, you see, revenge was a very popular theme on the Elizabethan stage. not only Shakespeare, all the major dramatists of the time, Turner, anybody you can name, Thomas Kidd, all of them were always writing plays in which somehow revenge would appear as a theme. For example, in Bangladesh TV, what do you see? Any TV drama, there must be a kind of triangular relationship. There must be a matrimonial couple, and there must be somebody trying to, destroy that relationship. So the triangle is formed. It is a very popular kind of theme. In Bangladesh, there is a paradox here, if you can actually take note of it. In Bangladesh, in society, adultery is not tolerated, isn't it? The triangular tolerated in Bangladesh, in society, in actual society. But in imaginative creation, in the movie, on the stage, in the story, in the novel, if there is no triangular relationship, the audience will not go to the hall. You will never read a novel if there is not a kind of extra pulling out of the marital relationship. Okay. So this is again a kind of syndrome that was also present in the Elizabethan age, though revenge was a popular dramatic motif. But revenge, officially private revenge, was banned by law. But on the stage, it was approved, and it was a very popular thing. Now, what I am trying to tell you here is that when something comes to Shakespeare, which has been a theme that has been exploited by other dramatists time and again, thousands of times, but when it comes to Shakespeare's hands, because of his magical touch, he either problematizes the issue, he complicates the issue, or he invests the issue with something which keep people thinking. It's like Maradona's touch. The same ball which is dribbled by a common player, say for example Burushaga or Valdano, will not really speak to your heart. But the moment Maradona puts his hand, puts his foot to the ball takes on a new life. That the same thing happened to Shakespeare when he was writing Hamlet as a revenge tragedy. Fine, Hamlet has been asked to take revenge. He should actually take revenge, but he contemplates. What is the guarantee that this ghost who is asking me to take revenge has come from heaven? He may have come from hell, and he may misguide me, and therefore he may actually turn me into a homicide, into a king killer, into a regicide, because Claudius is a king. So Hamlet thinks about it, okay? And therefore he deliberates, to be or not to be, that is the question. He delays and delays and delays. He cannot really make up his mind whether he should kill Claudius like that on the word of a supernatural being. But when the supernatural being's words is proved through the play within the play, still then Hamlet cannot kill the king. Why? There is a deep psychological reason pointed out by Philip Edwards with the thought of Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is the 19th century philosopher, agnostic philosopher. He said that, okay, in religion, in the Bible, it is said that Abraham heard the word. Abraham heard the divine word that you kill your dearest object. Okay. And therefore, Abraham thought that Ismail or Joseph in Christianity, Ismail was his dearest object, and Abraham was going to sacrifice Ismail because God has ordained it like him. But Kierkegaard raises the question, what is the guarantee that the voice that Abraham heard was actually the voice of God? What is the guarantee? Who gives this guarantee? So you see, agnosticism, that is the disbelief occurs. Hamlet also therefore suffers from this kind of Kierkegaardian, though Kierkegaard actually is from a later age, but Hamlet suffers from this Kierkegaardian confusion. What is the guarantee that the ghost? Okay, then finally the ghost was proven, but then is still Hamlet finds a problem here. The problem comes from his contrasting vision about the two brothers, his father and his uncle. He says a number of times that his father is like a Hyperion, like a Hercules, like Mars. So his father is added with all the divine glorification that is to be had. And against his father, his uncle is a satyr. A satyr means a lustful creature, a villain, a non-entity. There is no match. Okay, so therefore you can take revenge when the difference is very big. Okay, but then Hamlet discovers one true fact, that his uncle may be nothing compared to his father, but his mother has married his uncle, which means what? That to his mother, because of this reason or that reason, to his mother, there is no difference between his father, who is a glorified character to him, and his uncle. Only difference is that one is the first husband and the other one is the second husband. And the ghost tells Hamlet, oh, what a falling off was there. So when differences are eliminated, when the differences between the two brothers are collapsed, how can Hamlet take revenge? Because both are now same. And also at the same time, Hamlet discovers in his own nature that if he kills Claudius, then he will be somebody like Claudius. He will be another killer, which he does not want to be. So you see, here Shakespeare problematizes the theme of revenge by inviting or reinvigorating all these implications into the simple question. So the simple revenge, which in the Spanish tragedy by Thomas Kyd is a simple course of action, just go and kill them, becomes a very difficult kind of thing for Hamlet. So that is why you see Hamlet is a revenger, but he is a different kind of revenger. He is a tragic hero who cannot make up his mind. And then how Shakespeare is now becoming a writer siding with the conventional religious tone. Then Hamlet says, you know, he goes to the sea and comes back to Denmark because of the intervention of the piracy. Then Hamlet says, there is a divinity that shapes our end. There is a divinity that shapes our end. In Bengali, it means Amader Totita Porinoti, Oishorik Shokti Dara Niyontrito. Then he says, there is a divinity in the fall of a sparrow. In Bengali, Ishorer Adesh chhara ekta chodaio mara jay na. So Hamlet therefore now seeks, you know, authorized verdict from above, and he thinks he has got them, and only then he decides to go to kill Claudius. But again, finally he cannot kill him. He kills him on the spur of the moment, on the burst of an emotional thing. So Hamlet therefore, as the revenger, is a failure revenger. Even, you know, René Girard, the philosopher, the French philosopher, he said that Hamlet, though officially is a tragedy of revenge, but it is more against revenge than for revenge. This is what René Girard said, because Hamlet could not differentiate between the act of sacrifice and the act of revenge. But when we come to Macbeth, okay, then the usurpation becomes a different issue. In Hamlet, it is the victim who has made known to us his suffering through the ghost of his father. But in Macbeth, it is the opposite. It is the regicide, Macbeth, the killer of the king, who begins to suffer, not Duncan. Do you understand my point here? In Hamlet, it is the victim of the regicide who lets us know about his sufferings in the purgatory, and who also gives command of revenge to Hamlet. Take revenge, Hamlet. If thou love your father, take revenge. When you take revenge, my soul will be satisfied. That is the message in Hamlet. But in Macbeth, Duncan is killed. Duncan is the victim, but there is no suffering shown about Duncan. It is the killer. That is Claudius from Hamlet is now turned into Macbeth, a regicide with the thoughtfulness of a hooker. And this critic, Franco Moriarty, an Italian critic, very powerful critic. I mean, this Western scholarship, those who are teachers here, I must share this with you, that this Western scholarship has reached an apex which this part of the world will take almost 200 years to be at par with. Now, Franco Moriarty says that Macbeth is acting like Machiavelli, but he is thinking like Hooker. So there is a big problem. You see, when Macbeth is going to kill King Duncan, he does not give reasons as Claudius gives. Claudius says that I have killed my brother in order to grab the throne, in order to marry his wife, and this and that. But Macbeth is quite vague about why he is going to commit regicide. He says, rather, he gives a very positive picture about Duncan, that Duncan is a very kind-hearted king, and he has enjoyed much reputation in the kingdom. And if I kill him, then it is the angelic child that will circulate my killing all over the world in the atmosphere, everything. So then he goes to his wife saying that we should not kill Duncan because it is not going to benefit us. But Queen, that is Lady Macbeth, poses to be a very strong-willed woman here, a very different kind of woman. And she says, I know your heart is full of the milk of human kindness. I will take out this milk out of you and replace it with poison. Okay, so she says, if it is needed on me to be cruel, I would dash my suckling baby to death if it is required on my part to be cruel. And when she says this, Macbeth is now emboldened, and Macbeth goes ahead and kills King Duncan and comes back to his wife saying, I have done the deed. I have done the deed. You see, this euphemism is very interesting. He doesn't say, I have murdered the king. I have done the deed. Okay. And after doing this, he thought everything will be stopped. There will be no consequences. He said in the soliloquy, if I can kill Duncan at one blow and all the social consequences are stopped altogether, then I will be happily reigning in Scotland with my happy wife. Okay, this and that for years together. But after he has killed Duncan, he discovers, about which he was not aware, that he also possesses the same kind of Hamletian conscience, which he did never give any attention to earlier. So this conscience, this buried conscience suddenly now rises up. And he begins to hear strange noises. When there is no noise, when there is a literal knocking at the gate, Macbeth says, I heard a voice saying, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. Sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. But actually it was a literal knocking at the gate, because the order was given to the Thanes that in order to wake up Duncan from sleep, they should knock on the door. And when they were knocking on the gate, Macbeth thought that it is his inside which is making that noise. So this strange sensibility he develops after he kills Duncan. And he was motivated by the witches. And then again he finds
disconnect হয়ে গেল?
Let us wait until he is connected. I think his network is unstable. I think we'll get him. I think he's trying. If he's not connected, then I will make a phone call to him.
Actually, Sir did not leave us. Maybe he's trying to come again.
Yes, I think I'm making a phone call.
He's completely disconnected now. Banamali.
Sir, VC sir, can you hear us?
Yeah,
Sir.
Banamali.
Sir, VC sir is with us. Sir, VC sir. Chairman sir is, sir, unmute. আপনি আনমিউট করেন স্যার, ভিসি স্যার আপনাকে ডাকছে চেয়ারম্যান স্যার।
মিটিং শেষ নেই?
না স্যার, আরেকটু আছে স্যার।
আচ্ছা, আমি আছি।
স্যার
আমি
স্যার, ভিসি স্যার আপনাকে ডাকছিলেন চেয়ারম্যান স্যার।
আমি শুনতেছি, কিন্তু আমার এখানে ওই যে কিছু ডিস্টার্ব হচ্ছে, মানে ওই স্টেবল লাইন নাই আর কি আমার এখানে। আমি স্যারকে শুনতে পাচ্ছি না।
আমরা শুনতেছি বনমালী, আমরা শুনতেছি
স্যার এখন শোনা যাচ্ছে স্যার, এখন শোনা যাচ্ছে।
একটু স্যারকে ফোন দিচ্ছে।
কত বড় মিটিং হবে না। ও চিফ গেস্ট লাইন ডিসকানেক্টেড হয়ে গেছে।
Ragib, we can see Mohit Alam sir's ID here. So will you please make him a phone call and ask him? You can see his ID here. His ID is showing.
Yes, I am making phone calls. I made 2 phone calls, and I think he within a very short time he will be connected.
Yes,
he's trying.
Yes. So,
feel delighted to have our Controller of Examinations, Dr. Mustaq sir. Thank you, sir, for coming.
Right. It is okay.
I am very sorry that last
it is a technical problem.
Yeah. Our Bangladesh needs to overcome these technical glitches. Quite often it is disappointing. Yes, as I was trying to conclude, I mean, I have a lot of things to say along this line, but you know, it is already much time is past. Shakespeare, therefore, I think took an ambivalent attitude toward this issue of usurpation. Okay. Though he challenged the divine monarchy as not very tenable, but at the same time, he could not support the Machiavellian kind of villains who believed in killing and then gratifying their things only for their self-interest like that. So one answer to this problem can be had from benevolent monarchs. According to Shakespeare, Prospero, for example, in The Tempest, proves to be a benevolent monarch. And then in Henry V, is England's most ideal king because he also made that important victory over France at the Battle of Agincourt. And then there are other issues like this. It was A.C. Bradley who commented that in Shakespeare's tragedies, the superheroes and the villains, they are somehow eliminated. It is only the characters with lesser caliber they are allowed to exist. For example, a Hamlet disappears, okay, but a Horatio exists. A Macbeth disappears, but a Malcolm exists. It is also true about the sports arena. A Maradona disappears, but many lesser Maradonas exist, you see. This is probably the go of the world. We cannot help it. So this is my thought. Mainly, you see, Shakespeare is very enlightening for me because he enables my thinking power to grow. He widens my range of vision, and at that same time, he deepens my understanding of human nature. That is why I am really a fan of Shakespeare. And I would urge, I mean, whoever are interested in Shakespeare to take him seriously. And Shakespeare scholarship is astounding, formidable. If you go to Google site, JSTOR site, for example, on any issue on Shakespeare, you will find thousands of scholarly essays, and you would only rue to God that God has given you a very brief time period, which is never enough for you to exhaust the kind of a scholarship that has been produced on Shakespeare. So I would like to urge these young scholars, budding scholars, to read Shakespeare in the original. Another thing is that always try to read Shakespeare in the original. Don't go for paraphrasing. Don't go for translated versions. Read him in the original, because an original thing is always capable of contributing something to your understanding, which is never possible on the part of paraphrasing. For example, today I have paraphrased with due apology to Shakespeare many of Shakespeare's sublime lines. But if you had read those lines, you would be charmed by the beauty of simple beauty of the magical poetry. So that is where Shakespeare is Shakespeare. Thank you very much. Okay.